Hey all, this is Paul from Mostly Off Topic, and I'm introducing a new segment that we're going to be producing some videos for, called 5 Minute Monsters, for the 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, where we'll be covering some of the monsters from the Monster Manual, alphabetical order, in less than 5 minutes. The emphasis is upon players who know about the monsters, who've got access to the Monster Manual, so I'm not going to be doing in-depth tactical stuff. It's going to be more about world building, the implied world that we find out through these kind of creatures. Just pulling out some of the quirks of the Monster Manual and just seeing what hooks and kind of thoughts we can kind of spin off this. We will cover a little bit about the kind of stat block, in particular what does that mean in terms of the world, but it's not going to be kind of how to run these creatures. It's more about what does the existence of these creatures tell us about the Dungeons and Dragons multiverse. So we're going to start with the Aarakocra. I used to always pronounce it Aarakocra, but there is actually a C in there, so I'm going to go with Aarakocra. And they are a flying humanoid kind of race, neutral good, and they're kind of like in that low tier, quarter CR. So they're not going to be massive enemies of the player characters, and they're going to be more supporters of the player characters than anything else. They kind of originate from the plane of elemental air, and they are the servants of the Wind Dukes of Aaqa, who are beings of elemental air, I assume, called Avarti, who used to, back in the day, rule swathes of worlds until they got into a bit of a battle with the Queen of Chaos, and that all ended badly. And they kind of got a weapon called the Mighty Rod of Law that shattered off into 7 pieces, and the Aarakocra are kind of helping them, serving them, not quite sure what the relationship is there, to kind of find these pieces and to bat back elemental evil. So their role in the multiverse is to find elemental evil, stop elemental evil, and given that they're not that powerful themselves, they probably need to enlist the help of adventurers to do that, player characters. You could have a look at them and say, well, okay, why don't they just kind of go to the nation states or the powerful kind of like creatures and kind of say, hey guys, you need to do some stuff over here. So that would be a question I'd pose, and that might not be a bad thing. They become ambassadors from the Wind Dukes of Aaqa rather than kind of emissaries on the edges of civilization, kind of trying to get heroes to plod along and do this thing for them. Give them a more of a regal, more of a kind of like diplomatic stance would be quite an interesting take. And what they do is they go out and they spy on places, and they communicate back to their masters, the Wind Dukes, masters maybe, of Aaqa. So they must have some ability to communicate back. So they must either be able to travel, so there are portals to the elemental player plane near where the Aarakocra are based, or they are able to send messages, so across planes messages. So I would imagine within the Aarakocra population there are people who are able to act as messengers, who have through either magical powers or able to traverse those portals. In addition to kind of hating elemental evil, they are the sworn enemies of gargoyles. Gargoyles are CR2, these guys are CR quarter, so they must be hunting them in packs. So the likelihood is you're going to find a group of Aarakocra rather than a single Aarakocra. And also, gargoyles' main weakness is to Adamantine, so you can imagine that Aarakocra have a vested interest in trying to find Adamantine. Probably not much Adamantine on the elemental plane of air, so maybe they go out to the prime material plane and search for this to be able to use their weapons in their battle against the gargoyles. They probably have adamantine tipped javelins, and they can possibly, if heroes are going to encounter gargoyles, they're possibly there to help them, to kind of like give them tips, tell them and equip them with weapons against their sworn enemies. And they're litterers. They just litter everywhere. They kind of like aren't that bothered about material possessions. So an Aarakocra settlement is probably just covered with crap everywhere. Just think kind of like, a roost of birds. It's just rubbish, and it would be a little bit like that, I think, around the Aarakocra. Now, kind of what is good about the Aarakocra, kind of, I think, is that they can act as a story element. They can kind of start to drive that narrative. Clearly, they're part of any adventure path that involves the elemental evil. I think they kind of represent air in that way. But they also can kind of be a settlement in the Tomb of Annihilation. They're kind of a force there, and I think that role in the story of kind of being a slightly offbeat humanoid kind of race is the best place for them. if you are going to get involved in combat, then make use of their fly speed. Make use of the fact that they're kind of skirmishers. They're going to be darting in. They're going to be darting out. So what could be better? Well, I kind of prefer the second edition and early editions aesthetics of Aarakocra, rather than the kind of like the man with wings on the back and the eagle head. I kind of prefer it to be able to look a little bit more like this. They just look a little more otherworldly, having to use their feet for their javelins. It just looks more cool, I guess, and kind of suggests that they kind of really do have a place outside of the normal world. It also means that when the PCs first encounter them, they may be like, "Whoa, these are enemies. These aren't good guys. These are enemies. Look how freaky they are." And you kind of got a little bit of a tonal disconnect there, which I think is quite good. What would I be doing with Aarakocra to kind of improve them? I guess to kind of like help change them, give them some variants, give them some additional abilities. There's got to be some shamans in there, surely. There's got to be some kind of like a paladinic order of Aarakocra who are out there fighting the good fight against the Gargoyles. Some rogues that are kind of like stealthy, kind of wandering around assassinating kind of elemental evil cultists or what have you. Some investigators in that regard. So just kind of think about the variants. If these guys were evil, there'd be variants for them, just as there are for orcs and goblins and kobolds and such like. And how could you use these in a campaign? Well, here we have the Wind Dukes of Aaqa, who are searching for the mighty Rod of Law. Well, what happens if they found it? And what happens if they're now starting to rule some of those worlds again? And yours is one of those worlds. The Rod of Law suggests that they possibly aren't that bothered about taking into account everybody's views and finding a harmonious society. It feels very much like it's an air-based boom. We're the bosses here, guys. You follow our rules. So some kind of 1984 The Birds mashup where the player characters are kind of fighting the good fight for the land-bound races against the avian or air-based overlords. You kind of got to infiltrate the flying bases, got to get to the high peaks to be able to kind of get there, culminating in a battle on the elemental plane of air. That could be an interesting campaign and certainly a different take and different spin on the Aarakocra that I've not seen before. Anyway, I hope that you've enjoyed this kind of quick snapshot into the Aarakocra. I hope that you can kind of get something from it, even if it is just some ideas to riff off. If you like the video or subscribe to our content, that'd be appreciated. And we'll be doing Aboleth next. Thanks.